Hello, everyone, and welcome to the journalism workshop dedicated to mental health in fashion media. Please mute your microphones so we could start the presentation, and I will be able to introduce our speakers and start the conversation on mental health in fashion media. Wonderful to see you all. Please take a second to introduce yourself in the chat to other attendees, share where you're joining us from, what is your major if you're currently studying at the Academy of Art University, or if you are an outside guest, please share what brings you in this conversation today. So again, please introduce yourself in the chat, and moving forward, we will be sharing various resources through the chat as well. At the end of the workshop, I'll share the slideshow with all of you, as well as a selection of articles in press dedicated to mental health in fashion, and particularly mental health in fashion media. So the workshop is recorded. The link to the Zoom recording will be shared later today. And in a few days, the recording will be also posted at the YouTube channel of Academy of Art University Video Resources. We have fascinating panelists with us today, but we also have, I see very many familiar faces from the Academy of Art University faculty team and accessibility team as well. So at the end of the workshop, I also will be sharing various resources from the accessibility team that's working day and night to support our students in their creative journey. And I will start the presentation now. I will introduce myself and all the speakers. So our speakers today come from fashion journalism careers, as well as PR and communications. I myself am coordinating fashion journalism program at the Academy of Art University School of Fashion. My name is Elena Eberhard, and I've been working in fashion for more than 20 years. But my initial background actually is in social psychology. My undergrad degree in St. Petersburg State University back in Russia was in social psychology. So the topic of mental health is very close and dear to my heart, and I'm glad that we're discussing it today. Diane Dorrans Saeks, hello, Diane.
Hello, good morning.
Is fashion criticism, random research and reporting professor at the Academy, teaching with us for more than 20 years as well. And she's best-selling California-based author, editor, design lecturer, writing about fashion, style, and travel. Alexey Timbul-Bulokhov. Hello, Alexey.
Hey, everybody. Hello.
So Alexey is joining us from Valencia, Spain. He's teaching blogging, content creation and promotion, and social media content development. And Alexey is a fashion writer for the last 2 decades as well, and an activist for fashion social justice programs, as well as mental health programs. Flora Tsapovsky is joining us, just as myself, from San Francisco East Bay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Flora. So Flora is teaching social media strategies, creative writing, and storytelling. She's fashion, food, travel, and culture writer and social media expert. And I'm looking forward to hear Flora's perspective on mental health in fashion media today. And finally, Floran Muller is joining us from Berlin, Germany. Hello, Florian.
Hello.
Florian is a dear colleague and friend joining us again from Berlin, has been working in the fashion industry for 20 years, just as all of us, except for Diane. Diane, you've been in the fashion industry for the longest time for all of us. So Florian is specializing in fashion PR and guest management for fashion events. He studied economics and psychology and is currently being trained to offer psychotherapies as well. The topic of mental health sustainability is at the core of his work. He is currently agency owner of Muller PR and Consulting in Germany. He's also a systemic business coach and university lecturer. And I'm excited to hear Floran's perspective on mental health in fashion and in fashion media particularly. Kylian Chadwick is joining us from San Francisco Bay Area as well. Hello, Kylian. So Kylian has graduated with MA Fashion Journalism degree last fall and is currently continuing her education at the Academy of Art University. She's enrolled in MA Art Direction program. She's fashion writer, stylist, and photographer, and editor of L'Espace magazine that she will present to us today. And I'm excited to premiere Kylian's work in this workshop. So moving forward, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Something happened with my keynote. Whoops. Voila. So in today's agenda, we will walk through the topic of fashion, of mental health and fashion media, addressing it from the 5 W's, as we often do in journalistic process. We'll discuss what is included in mental health topics, when it emerged in fashion media, particularly why writing about it is important and matters in current fashion media landscape. We'll mention prominent creatives who are being open about their mental health and how it relates to their creative process. We'll overview who is writing about mental health and how to write about it, and what are the controversies and the future of writing about this complex and delicate topic. Before we move forward, let's just go through a few brief definitions. And I wanted to disclose that in no way we are not, we're not diving in the scientific background of this problem too extensively. We only have 1.5 hours to discuss mental health in fashion. So we will most importantly outline main topics of global conversation in this field currently, and we'll share various resources that you're welcome to explore after the workshop, and join this discussion on social media as well. It's an ongoing conversation, and although this workshop is happening during the Mental Health Awareness Month that's observed in the United States every year in May, but we all would love for the mental health to be discussed openly every day, and not in May, not once a year. So we feel honored to start this discussion today, make time and place for everyone to be heard, and hopefully share helpful resources for everyone involved. So mental health is defined as ability to fulfill a number of key functions and activities. I just wanted to bring up this definition so that bring us all to the same page, and then I'll be happy to hear from your perspective, especially for you, Floran, because we've been studying this topic for so long. So these key functions and activities include the ability to learn, ability to feel, express range of positive and negative emotions, form and maintain good relationships with others, and the ability to cope with and manage change and uncertainty. So as we see, those are all the situations that very often in fashion industry we do encounter daily. Again, we won't dive in the extensive overview of mental illnesses and disorders, but we briefly will highlight what are the main topics that fall under the umbrella of mental illnesses, mental health issues. So those could be mood disorders, anxiety disorders, personality or psychotic disorders, eating disorders, trauma, or substance abuse. Again, throughout our careers, for all of you who are on the panel, we definitely encountered frequently observed situations of people coping with these challenges. And again, just for the purposes of this workshop, I wanted to highlight an overview of the main topics that fall under the umbrella of mental health issues. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's been observed in the United States since 1949, observed with media, local events, and film screenings. Every year, a new set of tools is being released as a recommendation to the foundations and associations supporting mental health awareness. And on social media, various initiatives or awareness projects are running under various hashtags and themes each year. I had included a few of them. So the main goal of the initiatives in the last year were around breaking the stigma around mental health, and our conversation today is part of that, of this discussion, of this process. So shifting to fashion, this quote from Aristotle can be debatable, but still it's maybe part of the opinion that does exist in the society as well, that no great genius has ever existed without some touch of madness. So we all know that the frontier between the so-called norm is very fine, very thin. So we will now transition to discussing mental health in fashion, and then I will turn to our panelists in just a minute. We'll start with discussing the say particularity of fashion industry that can cause mental health issues within the fashion professionals. So it is a very fast-paced sector, as all of you know. It is in a way relentless, and it does create a unique set of pressures. There is an expectation in fashion that a fashion professional is 24-hour involved and interested and available to work day and night on the professional tasks. And at the same time, it's an industry that puts a lot of emphasis on perfection, setting high ceiling standards, which in their turn can lead to developing anxiety or causing additional stress. In the past, there was definitely lack of discussion of mental health in the workplace. I can attest, because I've been working in this field for so long, that definitely the situation changed. And in the United States, I would say it is more open and aware than in Europe. And then Floran, I would love to discuss and debate with you on this point. But at the same time, fashion workers are in a way underprepared to manage the pressure of the industry. Say students who are being trained to work in business quite often are being offered additional courses or support how to cope with high pressure of workplace in corporations world, while in fashion, quite often in fashion schools, that's part of the conversation that's offered by accessibility resources, but it's not too often that we see any specialized courses. So at least this dialogue that we have today may be part of that initiative. So I now wanted to pass the mic to our panelists and ask you to share stories and thoughts and your perspective on mental health issues that you had observed throughout your careers in fashion industry. You're welcome to share your perspective also on the causes that might create the situations where those mental health issues are being developed, or you can just describe your observations throughout the years working in fashion. Diane or Alexey or Florian, you're welcome to start.
Yes, good morning, Elena. Good morning, everyone. This is Diane. I'm in San Francisco today, and I'm not going to go through my whole chronology, but let me just say that I started working as a journalist when I was 16. My my father took me to see the editor-in-chief of the local top newspaper and told him that I wanted to be a journalist. And he said, he looked at my school record and he said, "Oh, why don't you come and work here in your school holidays?" So I started to do that, and they would throw me into every possible kind of story. And I told them at the beginning that I didn't just want to do the women's page. But anyway, I've cycled through a fantastic life in fashion and design. And I've seen so many different situations and so many different situations of stress. Let me say also, preface everything that we're saying by saying that the fashion industry has given so many millions and billions of people so much pleasure and has made so many people tremendously happy, whether they're sewing beads on a gown for Karl Lagerfeld, whether they're working at Dior, finding the fabric, fitting the clothes, whether they're sewing, whether they're making shoes, whether they're in the beauty industry. The beauty industry certainly has given so many people pleasure. But I've also seen a high degree of, fortunately, I realized at the beginning that I needed to be very stable and very focused to do my job. I had to turn up at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. But I observed, even as a very young high school student, people drinking, smoking, all kinds of things, and eccentricity was something that we thought of. And some of the most brilliant writers and some of the most brilliant people were called eccentric, but we're very happy. I'm also thinking about later, Bill Cunningham was an extremely eccentric, kind of weird person who made such a name for himself. So out of weirdness and eccentricity and sometimes addiction even, although addiction leads you down a very unfortunate, tragic path in general. But I've seen so many of these things, but I've seen so many people happy to be, all my friends and colleagues at Women's Wear Daily, a brilliant group of people. Among them, eccentric, crazy people, but who all fitted into the maquette of fashion. And let me say also, fashion is incredibly inclusive, really, possibly not in the way that it's now defined, but in the past, there was an enormously wide range of people. And some of them, were eccentric and possibly occasionally sad and sometimes didn't turn up for work. But, and some of them may have been on the spectrum, but that meant that they were brilliant with layouts and they were fantastic directing photography. But against all of this, I think about photographers and artists and graphic designers, fabric makers, fabric designers, handbag makers, all the people working at Hermes, the happiness that they've created. And I also am sympathetic and very aware that there are mental health issues in the fashion industry globally. And we'll talk about later. I was doing some research, and one of the things we'll talk about is suicide, which I was looking at among in the fashion industry and some of the developments of that now. We'll discuss those later, no doubt. But among journalists and writers and editors and all of the creatives, I've seen fantastic people, including originally John Galliano, who crashed and burned. But there's a balance. There's the great and there's the not great side. And I'm glad we're discussing the not so great side today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diane. And we're all striving to find that balance for everyone. It's a very individual, how would I put it? It's not the same for everyone, but I believe that many of mindsets, approaches, and just simple advice on coping can be helpful, and I'm glad that we're sharing it today. Florian, I would like to turn it over to you. I know we had a discussion on Clubhouse, the place where a lot of conversations are happening currently, whether fashion industry is causing some of the issues with the fashion workers, or whether it's an industry that is attracting eccentrics more prone to express various variations of norm, let's say. So what are your thoughts on this?
Okay, yeah, first of all, please let me know if it's not loud enough because my mic is a little bit far away, but I guess it's okay, or yeah.
It's all right.
I mean, Diane said already a few things I also, of course, experienced, and it's difficult to summarize everything in just some minutes, but I would say in these 20 years, I probably also have seen everything from suicide, basic depressions, anxieties, all these things I have seen, but the most important thing for me is that actually, I mean, Diane mentioned it, that there's of course a lot of beauty, but the question is the beauty only for the audience, or is the beauty also for the people being involved in the fashion world? Of course, Diane was on the rather healthy side, the journalist side, and these are the people we as a PR always treated well, you know? They always saw us when we were smiling and good looking, but behind the scenes in the backstage, everything was a mess. And I mean, people were turning crazy, crying, whatever happened. And of course, yeah, I mean, what she also described, there was a lot of, or still is, substance abuse. This is, I would say, come very often. Eating disorders you can see quite often. And also what in my opinion, what I want to say earlier is that you hardly see any older people. When I say older, it's already my age. It's really difficult to find people older than 40 years old. Of course, they are also there, but it's very rare. And I always make that joke. Either they're turning crazy and end in the psychotherapy, how's it called, in a hospital, or they go to Bali and open their yoga school, or whatever reason it might be, but they don't continue working in the fashion industry, or they just realize that it's not very easy to continue working there. And this is something I was always worried about, and I was always questioning myself, where are all these old people? Because I was always searching for people who could be some sort of mentor for me and give me some good vibes. And this is actually something where where it becomes clear that it's not a really healthy environment where you want to stay forever. And yeah, and actually, when you start, of course, we dig deeper now into the topic, but when you spoke about the industry, and this is something I also heard quite often, that it sounds like the industry is the problem. But from my approach, the question is, are the people getting ill because of the structures, or do the people enter already ill, you know? And I think we always have to see, without judging, who is entering already with a mental disorder and who's getting ill because of the special structures in the fashion industry. So they're totally different approaches. And I think you also mentioned it before that there can be everything. And for my work, it can be the factory owner in a country who doesn't earn enough money, and the risk is so much higher for getting depressions or anxieties. But there are also fancy agency people who suffer because of personality disorders. There might be models who have eating disorders. Depressions, as I said it already, anxieties can happen everywhere. So there is a really wide range of possible mental diseases. And so I would say I've seen everything already. Yeah.
Same here, especially during, I wanted to say during my work in Paris, from 2003 to 2013, I definitely saw very many cases. Most of the time, they were caused by addiction to drugs or any sort of substance abuse. And to Diane's point, fashion is a beautiful industry and we love working in it. It brings us excitement, it brings us joy, but I think that maybe because of the degree of emotional intensity that we do experience, that we seek, we maybe are observing more often the cases or outbursts of the downside of it. It's because the emotional charge of working in this particular industry is so prevalent. And that's why we like it. So it's just a complex topic that we won't be able to resolve, and we don't look for solutions, but rather to pointing out topics that are being timely right now, and especially sharing various resources that our audience might find helpful. So Alexey or Flora, would you like to comment now or later?
I would.
Oh, go ahead, Alexey.
Okay. I would just quickly chime in with, I think the list that you had about kind of the components of this industry that make it challenging for mental health, mental health maintenance are true. But in my own experience, I think that the other part of it, aside from the fast pace and the kind of high stakes emotionally, is that it is a very facade-driven industry. You know, the final product, that look, the image, the show, and it can be very difficult for people to separate like the facade and the inner work. And I think as individuals, we also have that idea of what, you know, presentability, what do I look like, what am I perceived like, and then what kind of work I have to do or can do or are able to do backstage to myself. Yeah. And so I think that it's at this intersection of where do we place the value? Do we place the value on the facade and the final product, which would be, you know, the collection or ourselves, or do we place the value into the production and maintenance and the work? And that can vary, of course, individually. But in my experience, that has been part of the struggle is in investing in the process or the product.
Right, I agree. And then I also have a feeling that with the big shake that the pandemic caused to the industry, the conversation shifted to the wellness side of it, where the process is prevalent on the final result, where the value of working well and feeling well about it at the same time is in a way more, it is prevalent. And I do hope that the new normal we are navigating to through the vaccine process, through countries reopening for physical events as well. So in this new normal, maybe the schedule of fashion industry in terms of the pressure that it puts on designers and the rhythm of producing collections, the rhythm of fashion weeks will naturally calm down, where we all will be able to come up with a new balance of work and life. So we move forward with a research that Vogue Business had conducted earlier this year, leading to the Mental Health Awareness Month. And it was focused on the freelancers' situation more globally, and on the difficulties and mental health issues they might experience because of the imperfections in fashion industry that existed before the pandemic and that got only stronger, unfortunately, particularly for freelancers. Flora, I know you would like to comment on this, so over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I started my career as a freelancer. Then I had a day job at a big women's website in Israel for a while, and then I moved to the States and again restarted my career as a freelancer. I've been doing that for about 8 years now. So there are definitely a lot of issues that stem from being from the fashion industry, fashion journalism relying so heavily on freelancing. Because we have currently two buzzwords that are very prevalent in conversation, and I'm really happy they are. So in the newsroom, if you're a staff writer, we have inclusivity issues and toxic work culture, which have been on everyone's minds in the past years. We all know what happened with the men repeller and the complaints that were happening there in the newsroom, right? And we also know Graydon Crater got himself into some issues with Vanity Fair, sidelining journalists, right? And also another like list of publications that if you work in the newsroom and you have the perks of being a staff writer, you have to deal with some toxic work culture issues. If you're a freelancer, on the other hand, you have burnout issues and financial instability, that you're dealing with. To that extent, I really recommend the book about burnout culture by Helen Peterson. I will drop your link later. I just finished it. And it really outlines how striving within the instability of freelance economy and gig economy can drive you to mental health issues. On the comment Alexey made, I wanted to also say that I had my bachelor's degree in psychology, and I remember very few things, but one of the things I remember is that mental health issues strive and kind of harbor indiscrepancies, right? And the discrepancy between the lucrativity of what you're doing and the events you're going to, and the ability that Alexey mentioned, and the way you're underpaid, right, is also a very dangerous place where you can, on one hand, feel on the top of the world one day because you're at a fashion show in the front row, but then if you can't pay your bills, right? So what are you doing here? So this discrepancy is something that I always try to keep in mind as a freelance journalist, and convey to my students how to approach being a journalist with some financial stability in mind, and kind of watching your mental health in those places, which are very tricky to navigate.
I know, Flora, you will have to leave us a little earlier, so I wanted to use this opportunity and to ask you, what's your approach? What are your tips on maintaining mental wellness while being a freelancer?
Right. So I wanted to say that actually toxic work culture is the reason I actually moved to the States, because I was working at a website and I had an editor who was, I don't know what she was dealing with, but there were some deep systemic issues with the way she was treating workers. And then this editor moved to another website I know of. And again, I've heard complaints from her employees there. So at some point I was so burnt out and sad and depressed that I had to go on a trip, and I ended up in the States, right? So since I try to recognize people who are aggressive, toxic, bad managers, bad editors, right, and stay away from them. And however, on the other hand, develop good relationships with editors that facilitate good relationships and stability, and are forthcoming and have mental health of the workplace in mind, right? That's one thing. And luckily for me and for everyone, I feel like most editors have these days some kind of a training or some kind of sensitivity awareness to the fact they won't yell at you or like bully you, right, over email. Everyone's trying to be nice, especially now with screenshots and the way anybody can be dragged in the mud, even the biggest names in the fashion industry, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is being very, very careful and calculated with my finances, and making sure I take care of my financial goals, right? By combining freelancing with other projects, and always kind of not leaving too much room for instability and unpredictability, right? Yeah, and also another thing that I find really extremely helpful is having a supportive freelance community around you. I'm a member of many Facebook groups and Slack channels where freelance writers such as myself share, successes, grievances, support each other, help each other with resources, and just talk about the trade, right? And before the pandemic, I even had a local coffee meetup for freelance writers in San Francisco, where we would meet once a month and do anything from like complain about this editor who was mean to talking about creativity and burnout, and sometimes you have a writer's block, right? So having these supportive people, even though you're not a staff employee of some place you go to every day, is very important as well.
Definitely. And I, because I've worked in Europe, in the United States, and with time, I see that definitely in the US, the workplace is healthier in terms of mental health and life-work balance in general. I believe it might be cultural. It might be that in time, the situation is improving. I do hope that it improves in Europe as well, that the problems are not swept under the rug, but openly being discussed. And most importantly, that the communities are forming where individuals can seek and find help. In the United States, definitely it's a community culture. more globally, not only in fashion industry. And social media is definitely, although it is part of our lives, that it's, to a certain extent can be causing anxiety if not addressed properly, but at the same time, it's a channel where like-minded individuals or professionals with a similar set of issues they're facing can find each other, find support, and find groups where they can discuss it, find resources, and just simply find support through the interaction. So, Florian, do you have any particular comment on freelancers, or we will move forward because there will be other moments to comment on this?
You said my name, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I mean, here again, the question is, are we talking about preventions for healthy people, or are we talking about people who have already the mental diseases? Because as I said already earlier, I'm specialized on the diseases. And of course, if you are a younger person, you just started working in the fashion environment, how can you tell if you're mentally ill? I mean, most of the diseases have in common that it's part of the disease that you can't see that you're mentally ill. So the question is, how can you handle that? And this is actually also a problem I have right now when I want to create awareness about these topics. How can we create awareness for a topic what people can't see by themselves? So what Flora described already, this is of course something I totally agree, but this goes rather for me into the direction that I try my best to maintain my health and that I prevent it. But me as an older man and hopefully a little bit more reflected person now after 20 years, and not comparing to Flora, that I'm more reflected, I said it now only for myself, that the last years, I realized it was more important to see what real mental problems do I have and to work on them, but professionally, not like just reading a book or not just breathing a little bit more, smiling a little bit more, because this doesn't help. If you're mentally ill, you have to have help, and then it's a hardcore job, And so this is the question. I mean, of course, I'm also making sure that I'm not taking every job, that I make sure that I sleep more, which I'm actually still not able to manage. As you described already in Europe, it's like sometimes really hardcore and crazy. During fashion weeks, you sleep like only 3 hours every day for like 2 months. And so, yeah, I think my best advice is really when you realize you suffer of something and certain patterns I always keep repeating all the time. Like, for example, everyone is crazy around you, or you feel that everyone is crazy. Then you should rather question yourself, maybe there is a reason why you always get into these structures, so that you don't see yourself as a victim and you think that the world is really crazy like that, but maybe there's something inside of you who's always searching this craziness, and then rather get yourself help and try to fix that. And then we can talk about the rest. So this is actually my main advice.
Right. And then I can't agree more that with maturity, with self-work, with growth, with professional growth as well, we start to recognize those potential issues or signs of a starting something that could potentially grow into mental health issue. We start to recognize it in a way earlier on and prevent it, from developing. But I think to that extent, it's really important that we're having this conversation today, because many of our attendees are current students, young, aspiring fashion and art professionals. So I believe bringing those issues up and sharing resources and helping to recognize issues that might be ignored is extremely important to that extent. And then a few prominent creatives unfortunately did experience mental health situations. Alexander McQueen had taken his life 10 years ago, and then now 10 years later, fashion media is reflecting on whether it had taught us something, whether the industry reviewed, understood what kind of pressure the designers are going through, especially with the frenzy of the rhythm of the fashion season. And again, to that extent, I believe that the pandemic will, although tragic, but it will do also some good to the creative industries, especially to fashion, because it did slow up naturally the cycle of fashion events, slowed down the production cycle as well. The companies are start trying to find that new balance, but maybe it will help some of the designers to understand that they don't have to to respect and correspond at all times to this cycle that being imposed by the industry, and that they can and should find their own balance. So I do invite everyone to read a story that I included in the selection of articles in Business of Fashion, excuse me, in Vogue Business, reflecting on Alexander McQueen tragic decision, I would say. So we will also mention a few others. Diane, you mentioned John Galliano.
Yes.
Yes. Go on.
I actually was doing some research this week, and I started making a list just to remind myself of some people who had got into trouble, but also I strikingly started making a list of people who committed suicide. And I think it's very important to, when I think over people that I've met in fashion and in journalism, and certainly I've been in a certain niche of fashion. You know, we're not talking about people who make Nike sneaker. You know, there are $1 and $billion industries in fashion, people designing perfume, but also there's the less glamorous side of it, which we tend not to be looking at. When we think of fashion, we think of glamour, we think of beauty, we think of designers, we think of Paris, but there's probably 80 or 90% of it is sportswear and t-shirts and less glamorous. But anyway, speaking of mental health of Alexander McQueen, I also thought about, you know, we've now forgotten about Kate Spade. Kate Spade
exactly.
seemed to, yes, Kate Spade. And recently Stella Tennant, the model, the
Yes.
granddaughter, a very privileged young woman, very beautiful young woman who worked for Chanel as a model for about 20 years, but had struggled with depression. Also Halston, we've just been watching this rather scandalous film about Halston on Netflix, and he's portrayed for about a third of this program taking bucket loads of cocaine. That was in the 80s, of course, when it was rather a prevalent common thing. Marc Jacobs has spoken about several times about relapse and treatment and his mental health and how he is looking now towards his health. Alexander Wang recently got into major trouble and headlines caused by various rave drugs, and seems like boatloads of drugs, and has been accused by about 30 young men of sexual harassment and misbehavior of all kind, and was in the headlines in the New York Times and so forth. He's now paid out millions of dollars to these people to sign now to quiet the story and hopefully get some treatment. Loren Scott, also a model, girlfriend of Mick Jagger, suddenly killed herself in a very tragic manner, seemingly to have everything. But one thing I noticed at the time was messages on social media after her death, that so many women commented, I understand how she was feeling. I was speaking of mental illness and mental wellness, Elena, I was really struck by how many people said they saw signs earlier. I must say I did not. Some other quickly people, Aboa has talked about mental health and mental illness that she's dealt with. She's now a spokesperson and a highly admired model, and has been on cover of British Vogue. Isabella Blow, fashion editor. I would just say very graphically and very honestly, and maybe this is a time when we should be honest and say, you know, Lee McQueen hung himself in a closet. Isabella Blow swallowed weed killer. and had struggled with depression for a long time. Kate Moss had substance abuse issues and is now seemingly on the sort of straight and narrow, but occasionally she's still thrown off airplanes for drinking and misbehaving. So anyway, I'm sure she's dealing with it, but she's hugely admired. She's a survivor for sure, and I admire her. John Galliano, unfortunately, I thought the saddest thing was even after he had been in treatment and for years, and that he came back and was blaming Dior for his illness. No, sorry, don't blame someone else. I was really sorry that he didn't take responsibility for his behavior. And he may have been under pressure and so on, but there are ways of getting help. There are ways. I thought it was fortunate that he hadn't got past it. But anyway, God bless Kate Spade and Stella Tennant and Isabella Blow and all of these people who've given us so much pleasure and the beauty they've created. And no doubt there are many others. And, certainly conversely, there are many people who I would say, I don't think it's a mental disorder exactly. It's not so much part of the spectrum of mental wellness or illness, but I know many people in the design world and in the fashion world who have dyslexia. And,
yes.
And, here we have, my favorite moment on TV this year was Elon Musk getting up in front of, about 20 million people and saying he had Asperger's. Bravo to him. It was, I work with people.
Very brave.
So that's not a mental illness exactly. It's possibly a disorder. It's actually a high functioning thing that people have. But anyway, that's, I wouldn't blame fashion for any of these. People came into the fashion world to create, and they created and they were appreciated. And they possibly had a predilection for alcoholism or whatever that came along. But I would also say, Elena, the really important thing is, I know I had actually an editor that I was working with a book on, and she'd turn up late for every meet. This was in New York. She'd turn up late always. She was always in a rush and a fumble. And she'd tell me some stories about how the delivery man for FedEx broke into her apartment and attacked her or something. And I think, oh goodness, life in New York. Anyway, the stories got sort of excuses, but she was addicted to oxycodone, I later discovered. And that was the end of her career. But anyway, a lot of colorful stories, and also lots of people like Bill Cunningham, who had, was kind of a weird guy actually, but fabulously creative and admired and accepted in fashion. But anyway, that's the balance.
Thank you, Diane, and especially thank you for sharing the names of those we want to remember, particularly on this day and this time of the year during the Mental Health Awareness Month. So I see, Uduak, you would like to comment on this. So I'd love to pass the mic over to you and hear your perspective on this.
Yes, thank you so much. Such an important topic. Two perspectives I want to offer. First of all, that from a legal standpoint, I always come from that viewpoint. I am a fashion lawyer. I think that one of the things that the legal profession has done has been to be very slow to take the fashion industry very, very seriously. And I say that because when I listen to everything everyone has to say, the bulk of the problems that come from fashion, and I've been in the fashion industry since I was 15, over 29 years. The bulk of it comes from the workplace, whether you're talking from the designer standpoint, from the model standpoint, photography, everything is happening. A lot of the abuses, a lot of the assaults, a lot of the drug use and substance abuse, everything is happening for the most part at the workplace, overworking, labor, and employment violations, and the list goes on. So it is time that we take it seriously, which is why the genre, or the specific, not genre, the specific focus in on fashion law becomes more and more important, and not just from the transactional standpoint where we're doing the deals, but also to file those lawsuits and stop this really bad behavior. So that's one thing. The other thing is that one of the things I've always said with us creatives, yes, I'm a lawyer, but I'm also creative too, is that Often we take bad behavior and we magnify it and say it's okay because people are so ridiculously talented. We love the beauty and everything that comes from it, but we are complicit and sometimes contribute to behavior getting bad. So when you look at the John Galliano example, from a standpoint of a lawyer and a creative, I completely agree with him that the responsibility is shared on both ends. Because in regular other employment settings, there is no way you're going to go and behave as badly as John Galliano did. Maybe some industries that tend to, maybe trucking industries or whatever, might accommodate such ridiculous behavior. But for the most part, corporate America, you can't go and behave as badly and have it be as accommodated as it was for him and many others in a situation. So he is right. Part of that blame is on the employer, and it's also on the employee with the bad behavior that came to the workplace. So we have a lot of work to do, both from the legal standpoint and then employers, sanctioning bad behavior because someone is creative. And it's not just unique to fashion. We need to weed it out from the music and film industry as well, industries that I also represent talents and employers at. We have a lot of work to do. And I, for one, I'm committed to it, both from a courtroom standpoint of filing those cases when they need to be filed, and of course from the creative standpoint of educating and advocating as well. So those are my 2 cents, and I thank you for such a wonderful topic and very, very important topic.
Thank you, Duak, and certainly people and professionals like you are contributing to the workplace improving considerably in the United States and hopefully in the rest of the world. And to Florence's point, there are unfortunately countries where which are far behind on the workforce situation more globally, put aside the mental health issues it can cause. So hopefully with smaller steps like these talks, we might see improvement in the years to come. I see Adnesha, you would like to comment on this, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Elena. Let me lower my hand. So I have to say, overall, from what I've been listening to, I'm a bit disappointed in this conversation and some of the examples that have been provided, because I feel like there's this overall consensus that it's the onus of the person that's suffering to figure out what's wrong with them and to thus fix the problem. And I feel like there's just this victim blaming that's going on in this conversation. And I've been very disappointed in some of the examples that have been provided, because as someone who has worked on the corporate side of fashion, I don't discuss that experience that I've had, but I can say from personal experience, I have firsthand had an experience with the toxicity of the fashion industry, especially on a corporate level. Agreed. And I'm a bit disappointed in the conversation in that there seems to be this blame that we need to, is it the person who has a problem coming into the industry? Did the industry cause the problem? I don't think that matters either way. If the industry itself is toxic, then it's exacerbating the problem. May they have come in with the mental health issue or not. I feel that overall, fashion has been a very toxic, not as innovative or as inclusive as it likes to present itself. As Elena, I feel very strongly about a lot of these topics. I know. Furthermore, I think that as my child is on the spectrum, and we brought up Elon Musk, and hearing that conversation about how he presented himself as having Asperger's, which is nowadays an outdated term that is no longer used when referring to anyone on the spectrum. So I'm a little, I take issue with some of his language, but again, I don't like this idea that we're excusing the industry's behavior, because look, it makes pretty things. I think that we really need to take fashion, the whole industry, to task in all levels, and recognize that for a very long time, it has been a toxic workplace that has caused serious mental health. It caused me very serious mental health, where I almost gave up fashion altogether as a career. And I'm just a little disappointed in this conversation that it seems to be going in that direction, that, we need to blame the people and figure out what's wrong with them, or if they came in sick. That's just not how we are going to fix things if we're not going to take fashion itself to task and hold it to a standard that we're holding other industries to. So that's just how I feel.
Adnesha, thank you. And we will move forward because we are not done yet. And to your point, I wanted to say that we were not excusing fashion industry at all. What Diane was saying is that there are situations where it comes from the individual. There are situations where the workplace is causing it. And we started, and Flora was the one to mention it as well, that toxicity of workplace is notorious in fashion, but it is improving. And let us continue the conversation and see if it brings us to a direction that might be responding to some of your questions, because we hadn't finished yet. So let's have another round of comments from our audience moving forward, because I believe we maybe, I also wanted to give time and place to Kailyn to showcase her work and then add a new dimension to this conversation that, again, Adnesha might respond to some of your questions and the critique that you shared. So currently, you will see a lot of initiatives running, particularly this month, around mental health, and we won't dive too deep in it because all those are exposed openly in the press, and I provided a selection of stories where you can overview those initiatives. So it's an attempt to draw attention to mental health more globally. To your point, Floran, this is mostly preventing, not always helping people who are already in a situation where they develop mental health disease. But again, every drop counts. So do review those stories, see what the brands are doing, see how you would like to participate in this process. And I do hope that those initiatives will continue to run all year round, and not only in May, the same way as we would and should celebrate Black creatives, not only in February, and celebrate women creativity, not only in March, but again, it's the time of the year where those projects are more prominently highlighted in the media as well. There are various resources, podcasts being run by fashion media with prominent creatives where they are sharing their perspective on mental health. Brands are launching capsule collections with the profits being donated to charities supporting mental health and providing resources and funds to people experiencing mental health issues, people in need. We can move forward and discuss some of those initiatives, but most importantly, I wanted us to move forward and get to discuss the creative process and observe, especially in Kailyn's situation, how a mental health condition can become part of a creative process. And for me, as creative and as someone having background in psychology, I think is really precious, where we're not trying to heal at all times, but we are trying to find a balance for each individual and his or her professional situation, where a mental health condition or a lifelong mental health condition can become part of creative process, and where the professional, the individual will not search for healing, but will search for a personal balance at this point. So unless you, our panelists and speakers, would like to comment on brands' initiatives, I would like to kind of fast forward to Kailyn's work, so to make sure that she has time to share it with us. Any particular comment on brands' initiatives? And while you are reflecting on this question, I also wanted to highlight a controversy that exists around brand initiatives for mental health. For some brands, it might become, and it does become, part of their marketing efforts. So although I do salute again, every step towards rising awareness, but we all look for authentic examples, authentic initiatives, not doing this for the sake of marketing and for the sake of maintaining conversation with a particular generation, but for the sake of truly, really helping people in need, helping them with resources, with funds when they need it, with access to communities and groups and so forth. So I would love to hear a couple of comments on brand initiatives and then move forward to discussing mental health as part of creative process for fashion professionals.
Elena, I just made a quick list of some companies that have for a very long time had mental health care provided for their staff and have been very proactive. Estee Lauder, for example, most of their employees are women globally. Estee Lauder is the third largest beauty company in the world. And they, through subsidiaries of their company like Jo Malone, MAC Cosmetics. MAC Cosmetics has been very, very proactive, raising funds for AIDS awareness, raising funds for some of their lipsticks even had all the profits went to some mental health issues among various parts of the population as well. I admire them tremendously. Athleta, which is owned by Gap, I notice now has very diverse projects and programs that they've set in motion concerning mental health, especially from the point of view of fitness and the importance of fitness in sound mind, sound body, in a sense, and some of those issues. Also JanSport, which makes athletic gear and backpacks. Lululemon is another company that's been raising awareness and funds, knowing that pretty much 98% of their clients are women as well. And rather a bit late possibly, but the Kate Spade company, which now is no longer owned by the family, has initiatives also very conscientiously for assistance with mental health issues. So that's just a few. And Gucci also, and Kering through Chime for Change has many, many issues. And I've been part of some of the hacks they've done in San Francisco, bringing in students with hacks they've invented to help students, especially with mental health problems. I've been very amazed and impressed with some of the creativity involved with ideas of changing information on mental health and dealing with mental health. So there's a lot of work going on in both of these industries.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diane, for preparing and sharing this list with us. Very helpful. Uduak,
yeah, I was going to add
yes,
to that
sure.
and say, yes, absolutely. Great list, by the way, Diane, and even more beauty brands and fashion brands overall with that initiative. But another thing that's happening, and I think that's really a good projection for the industry and the direction we may be going, is that a lot of fashion brands are taking into account remote working for the parts that we can do remote working, and emphasizing as part of that whole emphasis on mental health and awareness, that their employees adopt, a healthier lifestyle, from nutrition to exercise to sunlight and water, among other things. You're now seeing brands really emphasize that whole part and rest. And I think that employees are going to be able to implement that. Obviously, not everyone, depending on the specific role they're playing in the fashion industry, but many more will be able to implement that, because we're now in a post-COVID world where brands are having to do or strike a balance with remote work. And that makes such a big difference in hopefully reducing the number of mental health issues we see in the industry as a whole. Thank you.
Well, Elena, just a quick note also about the newest trends that I'm seeing, and this has an aspect of mental health and mental wellness in it. Gucci and Stella McCartney are moving forward very strongly and very boldly with lines of gender neutral fashions. And I was incredibly impressed with Stella McCartney's point of view about it, which was the old idea of gender neutral was very bland, boring, shapeless clothing that started to be sold a few years ago. And she said, we started talking to everyone involved, talking to the designers, talking to our customers, talking to clients, talking to the creatives, talking to fabric designers, and Gucci has been doing the same. And they said that far from these sort of boring, neutral, gender sort of neutral clothing that used to be the idea of it, she said, we're going forward with, we're supporting gender neutral initiatives and gender neutral people, and creating lines that they really love that enable them to express their individualities, to express their creativity, to be the stylish people that they want to be, and they no longer have to be hiding in the shadows or unrecognized. So it's very, very, very happy to read that yesterday. It's very new information, but I expect to see more of this. And I think that a large part of the population will be assisted with their mental health, mental balance, and people of all kinds will be acknowledged and are supported by the fashion world in that direction. And Stella McCartney actually made a wonderful comment, just to bring some humor. She said, my parents, Paul McCartney and her mother, she said they, in the 60s, they wore gender neutral clothing. They were, and it was bright and happy, and it was sometimes floral and sometimes it was sort of menswear. And she said, look at Mick Jagger, gender neutral. So, you know, thinking about inspiration, I thought, I really admire this, and she's done some background on it and understood that it was a mental health issue and that she could support a great range of people. So bravo to her for looking at it in a new way and in an educated way that wasn't blaming everybody, but was rather giving the fashion world a chance to support young people, especially, I think.
Thank you, Diane. And then transitioning to young creatives, I wanted to pass it over to Kailyn, and who will share with us her work, a magazine, lifestyle and fashion magazine she created that's called L'Espace, that she launched in the fall, and magazine publishing a digital print class at the Academy of Art University. Beautiful work that I find moving and very brave at the same time. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Kailyn, you're welcome to share yours and walk us through your magazine and share your thoughts on creative process, acknowledging mental health conditions. Just a second. At times it's hard for me to so stop sharing my screen. And Kailyn, you're welcome to share yours.
Okay.
Yes, wonderful.
Sorry, one second. Okay, so L'Espace, which is French for the space, was my thesis project for the fashion journalism program. And what I'm going to focus on are these interludes that I wrote, and there's 4 of them. And it breaks up the magazine into 4 different sections. And they are based around this idea that I've always had as someone with bipolar disorder about who is really in control. I would find myself having depressed episodes, manic episodes, or rapid cycling, which is basically having these 2 episodes right after one another. And I would be very observant about the effect it had on my loved ones, on relationships, friendships, romantic or otherwise, and thinking, okay, so who can I trust? Which Kailyn is the real me? How can I have such dramatic experiences and then they're over, and did they really happen? So the interludes begin with me introducing myself, and it's from a stable point of view. And then we go through the magazine, and now I'm in collections that I did reviews on, and I'll go through here to Interlude 2. And this one is from the point of view of a manic episode. And I wrote these when I was stable, which was interesting because I've had some feedback that they're very detailed, and it's almost as if I wrote them during the episode, but I actually wrote them all in one night, just kind of having this stream of consciousness flow through me. So Interlude 2 is the point of view of a manic episode. And then here I wrote a piece about the singer Halsey, who I found I had a lot of parallels with. She is also mixed. She is African-American and Italian, and I'm African-American and German and Native American. And she also has bipolar disorder. And she's the first and one of the only artists that I've encountered that just writes about bipolar disorder in such a real and vulnerable and frank way that I related to. And my interludes are also from that perspective. There's, I really do not react well to reading literature that has an agenda, and an agenda of, look at me, I, have mental health issues, but I kind of made it out on the other side, and that's great. And those are positive experiences that need to be documented, but I personally do not have those same experiences. So to find an artist who just writes about it and its ugliness, and in some of its beauty that can come from it, and there is some beauty that can come from it, I really took to this artist, so I had to include a feature. And we're moving through another. And now we're at Interlude 3, which I'm going to read. Is that still okay, Elena?
Absolutely, yes, please go on.
Okay.
Would love to hear it.
Okay. Okay, so we meet again. In case you forgot, my name is Kailyn. My old familiar friend is here again. Probably and sadly enough, the only configuration that feels natural to me. I swear I can see it approaching under the crack where my bedroom door meets the floor. And I'm taken back to years where I swore the Grim Reaper was waiting for me, always a few feet behind, waiting and waiting, waiting. He said it's where I belonged and he will always find me. A looming cloud that grew and grew until it flooded my mind, and everything I thought I knew, I no longer believed. It's a funny thing when I think about how for so long I thought it was normal, and now it is normal. It has a name, a label. I'm still not sure if that makes a difference, but everyone else seems to think so. It's harder to treat, but it seems to be easier on everyone else when I'm physically and mentally rendered immobile. Everything I thought was good, everything that was pure is simply non-existent, and I can't remember what it was like before. When will it end? I cry myself to sleep every night, but even I grow to accept that this is my new reality. Hopeless melancholy is the perfect recipe for this heartache that drags on, and I start to think that this is growing old, tired, and overplayed for everyone around me. It's a grieving time, and my sister holds me through the night and tells my mother I cried in my sleep. A man, a boy, stands 6'3" over my bed. Who is that? I can't even recognize love in front of me anymore. It's my brother in distress over my condition, followed by baby sister bringing me crystals. I'll take all the help I can get, but I cannot help myself. I find solace not from family or friends, but in Halsey and Carrie Matheson from Homeland, characters whom I feel truly understand me. I said only a few days ago, something bad is going to happen to me. A lingering prediction of what was to come, but it still knocks me off my feet every time. Nice to meet you. I do not recognize myself. So that is from the perspective of a depressed episode. And that is just an account of what I can remember, thoughts that stay with me afterwards. And I've learned over the course of having this condition that the brain, when experiencing trauma, can actually like block or stop the memory making process. So oftentimes after the fact of a manic or depressed episode, people will tell me things I said or things I did. And it's not an excuse for the behavior, but a reason that I will not be able to account much of what happened. It's just kind of like I blacked out. So that's the third interlude, and this is a photo shoot. My sister is the model, and my other sister was the photographer for these images. And then the final interlude is kind of like a full circle moment. I'm back to being stable, and it's kind of like a reflection, not really a conclusion. I guess it's a conclusion to the series. It's kind of open-ended, and it's the realization that all of these episodes or states are a part of me, and you can't really choose which one is normal or which one is in control. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that.
Thank you, Kailyn. This is beautiful, so beautiful, and moves me every time you share. And hearing you read it is precious. So thank you so much for being here with us and with sharing your voice and your story. And I remember reading them, I guess maybe the next night after you wrote them, and working on a magazine in a class. Was, you know how it goes in the semester with ups and downs and all sorts of situations. So you bringing this very personal dimension actually made the magazine a really powerful and an exciting read. So I do invite everyone to read it. I believe Kailyn will at a certain point share it on issue. It's now being part of the recording. You will be able to have another walk through the magazine. And Kailyn, I do hope that you will continue running this bus. And I'm so sure that your story and in your approach is and will be very helpful to many young creatives. And it's very brave to share it. And I did hear, and I remember you saying that it did a lot of good for you as
yes,
well.
I wanted to say that I had starting the thesis project that semester, I had no idea that I was going to write about this. It's always something that's very private and very personal. And it was funny because my mother had told me before I went to Academy of Art, she had always said, because we call it the healing process, and the healing process is never over. We're always healing and growing. And she had always tried to teach me that being vulnerable is the hardest thing that we as humans can do, because it puts us in a state of, putting ourselves out there and opening up. And I would always tell my mom, I said, I will never write about bipolar. I will never write about it. It's because I don't want to seem like someone who has an agenda, look at me, I have bipolar and I'm a functioning human. It's just like, that's not the way that I see it. I see it as something that can be, very beautiful at times and very devastating. So it's very conflicting. And then I realized I just sat down and I started writing about it. And I realized that that was the next level for me in my healing process, was to kind of put it out there in a public space, because maybe there's someone like me who is like, okay, you're talking about mental health awareness, you're talking about this and that. It's such a blanket statement. What about something real, something like a real experience that I can read and relate to and think, that's when I think. oh, I'm not the only one out there. Like when I'm reading literature like this, that's raw and comes from a place of vulnerability. So, so it's great to share it in this way.
Thank you. Thank you, Kailyn. And then also embracing it as a place where your inspiration can come from or stem through. And then again, having this retrospective ability now, again, I think this comes with your professional growth as well, where you as a professional writer, now you learn progressively to not only recognize those moments, but also to capture the glimpse of inspiration that they can bring and then infuse it in your work. Now I know you continue your education at the Academy in art direction. That's a field that you were always drawn to very strongly. And I can't wait to see the future work that you will produce in the Academy. And it is beyond inspiring. And I see the comments in the chat from our workshop guests, and you will read them too. And then, by the way, guys, I will share with everyone the chat transcript as well, so you'll be able to keep the resources, the advice been given, and everyone's contacts. We will be wrapping up soon. We have a few minutes left, and I will return to my presentation so that we would be able to share with you also the resources that the Academy Accessibility Resources provided. But I wanted to, yes, to give everyone time and place to react to Kailyn's work.
Elena, I just need to say I have to go now because my other talk is starting in 2 minutes. Just give me 1 minute, please, because first of all, thank you so much for that talk. Also, Kailyn, your work is amazing, and it would be great if you could share it by mail, because I told you already before, your Instagram account is it's really cool. So the work right now is really beautiful, and I would like to read it with more time. And actually also, I mean, the 1.5 hours is not enough time for the whole topic. So I'm really sorry that it came wrong, is this the right word, to amnesia, because it was everything but not victim blaming, because me as someone who's working in that field, I'm really concerned about the mental illnesses. I take that very serious. So I have nothing in mind concerning victim blaming. It's actually the opposite. And I think as well that it's important to approach it from different angles, like also talking about the working conditions. And I mean, it's a tool of everything together. So if there was anything which sounded like victim blaming, I'm really sorry, because this was not at all my intention. It's rather the opposite. But thank you so much, and hopefully we can have a deeper talk next time, because it's a huge topic. I mean, we could have spoken only 1.5 hours about Kailyn's work, I guess. So yeah, I'm really curious to continue on that, and I'm so sorry that I have to run now on the other talk.
No problem, absolutely. Florian,
so
and I apologize. I think maybe my mic is muted. Am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh. So thank you, Florian. And now you're part of the community. So your contacts are shared with all the attendees, and we'll continue the conversation through all the channels that we have.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Florian, we'll invite you to cool masterminds to talk about it more. Thank you so much.
I promise, but now I have to go to the
Thank you. I'll ask my sweet professor who's on this call if we can invite you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Have a good day. Bye. Ciao.
Thank you, Florian. So I will just to wrap up the presentation, I will share a few resources that the Academy for the Accessibility team prepared for us. So you'll have them in the PDF of the presentation. And they also generously put together the wellness apps that are recommended to our students in order to maintain mental health through the learning process. You also will have the access to the recording of our previous workshops, as well as my contacts. So I will stop sharing at this point, and I will bring it back and open the floor to more questions and comments from our audience.
Can I just share, Elena?
Sorry.
Like I feel like I'm gonna have to be fighting to get a spot in here to say something.
Sorry, I
Kailyn,
just wanted to
say
share.
you're so amazing. That's all I wanted to say.
Sorry,
Kailyn.
I was just going to share that if you have Kaiser as a healthcare provider, the Calm app is actually free. You can get one free year of premium Calm app without having to pay for it if you have Kaiser as your healthcare. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, I was looking over the Elena, like the mental health, like things that the Academy says are free. Some of them are not free. Like Headspace is not free.
Right. Let's turn it over to the accessibility team who is with us today. If you would like to switch on your mic and comment on this particular selection. So I see Anne and other colleagues from the Academy. If you'd like to comment on that.
Sure. Hi, I'm
you,
Anne Steckler, and I actually work in the Academy Resource Center. And we partnered with Accessibility to put together this list of resources. I do recognize what you're saying, that some of these apps don't appear free, but they're often student discounts that you can get. And most of them, we tried to include free ones. We're constantly updating these forums, and we're going to be updating them this summer for our students. So thank you for pointing that out. We are aware of some of these issues, and we're working on fixing these lists for our students. And there's always new things that are coming out. So if you have something that you would like to share with us, a resource like that Kaiser tip about Calm is really helpful, please do reach out and let us know. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Anne. I also wanted to pass mic again to Alexey and hear Alexey's comment on mental health condition being part of creative process. I know we discussed it in the past, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you everyone who has shared so far, and Kailyn for sharing your work. And it actually made me think about what I had wanted to speak for a second about, and that's that mental health awareness and mental health awareness, the management of it, because I feel like it really is about the management of it. Yeah, because I am someone who lives and works with depression. And in 2017, I wrote a blog post that was called 5 Likes from My Depression that went viral 3 years ago, where I talked about like how it affects me, and that, you know, some days you win and some days you just don't, you know, some days you just go, I'm not gonna win over this. And then you move to the next day. And so, but I feel that mental health wellness in creative industries comes from community, you know, comes from sharing our stories with each other and being like, I recognize that resonates with me. I'm not the only one. We're not even the only 12, you know, and this support is really vital and important. And part of it, I think, also is, Adnisha, you had brought up a great point about the difference between, like, where's the line between victim blaming and personal responsibility, and being able to take that. I went through that myself as well when I started working in the industry. And then I was like, I don't think I can handle this. I don't think it's for me. I think it's like, I think I'm the problem. The problem is all mine. And then having people who explain and help me understand that, no, it's actually both. There's problematic structural issues, and then there's my issues. And I can take responsibility over trying to, you know, take care of me first. It's like, you know, putting the airplane mask metaphor, you know, putting it on yourself first, and prioritizing my self-care and taking care of my mental health wellness before I can re-engage, or as I continue to engage with structures. So it is about kind of these conversations and sharing with each other in the way that Kailyn shared and we're talking about is part of what empowers ourselves and others to take responsibility for what we can and manage it in the way that makes sense for us. And I'll put the link in the chat. There's one of my students in the blogging class 2 years ago wrote a beautiful post as well. It was about Her name is Brandy, and she also, the post she wrote for the class was about how a skirt saved her life, that she was going through a depressive episode, and then, you know, she was on the floor and she saw this skirt and she was like, that's a nice skirt, I should put it on. And it kind of moved things off the dot for a minute. And that inspired, reading that post inspired me to think about like clothing choices. And even, you know, this is like minuscule micro example, but I hadn't thought of it before. And then I looked at my own closet, and I actually have these two shirts. I'm wearing one of them right now for the special occasion that it is. I bought this shirt in 1995. It's the oldest item of clothing I've had since 1995, and it's been with me like through everything that's happened to me in my life since then. And I hadn't realized that like I put it on as like, this is my blanket. I forget which character, you know, like the cartoon character that carries the comfort blanket. Yeah. And so I was like, this is that for me. You know, I've worn it to interviews. I've worn it under other shirts when I was like, I'm going to need extra support. Let me put this shirt on. And it's that micro thing that helps me when I need a little bit of Linus. Yes, thank you. Linus and the blanket. When I need a little bit of like comforting strength, or at the end of a long day, I get home and I'm like, I'm gonna put on my 1995 vintage shirt on to get through this evening a little bit easier. And that to me is, you know, again, kind of brings it full circle to the connection between fashion and mental wellness and how it can manifest even in clothing choices for us. So yeah, I think it's definitely a super important topic that has so many elements, and each of them could deserve its own separate panel, from the workplace to the legacy of, you know, sexist, racist imagery that we have inherited, and how those affect generational imagination of how we see ourselves and what's possible, to the permissiveness that Wang had mentioned of industries. So I think all of it works together, and it's important to share stories to recognize that we also have agency within this process to take care of ourselves, but then to affect change for the communities that we are part of in this industry. So that's my 2 cents, and I'll throw the links in the chat. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alexey. I know we had more raised hands during the conversation. Isabel, I remember you had a comment, so if you'd like to share it now, if it's still relevant, you're welcome to.
Okay, I think like in both cases, I think both a toxic work environment and the individual are have a lot of things to share, because it's kind of like a seesaw and like the balance scale where you're trying to balance it out equally. As someone who has a younger brother who's in the spectrum, it's very easy for a person to react in a way that other people think is to something that it looks normal, but to them is out of the ordinary. So in a sense, it's not that the person who's in the spectrum is at fault, it's just that the way that they see the world is very different from a person who supposedly carries the title normal. So I understand that as that the thing is always kind of like an equal partnership in relationship. Sometimes a person is accountable for their actions because there was nothing like to trigger a response in such a way that they reacted like. But in other cases, I think both of them are responsible in equal shares, because you never really understand what a person will react to until you see them react. Every different mental condition has different ways of expressing itself. For instance, I know that Howard Hughes, like even before he became famous and started in the movie industry, he already had exhibited a lot of things from OCD before, and it just became more and more apparent every time that, and the more famous he got, the more apparent it became. And in a sense, I agree with Florian, because sometimes you don't know that that you had a mental health condition until you become more exposed to pressure and more stress, and then it starts flourishing in that regard. But other times you develop it without even having had it before. So it just depends on the individual, because every individual is perfect. As someone who has a brother on the spectrum, like autism is different for every person. The same thing is for every mental condition, because it's not one size fits all. It's more the individual approach to it.
And this is why the individual stories matter.
Mhm.
Right. So Isabel, thank you so much. Adnesha, if you, since you expressed critique and now we're nearing to the end, did we manage to answer some of your questions? So did the direction of the showroom, of the workshop took into the, did we cover some of the doubts that you had? Or if not, what would you think should be the next steps for the community like ours?
Yeah, I would say that some of my concerns and critiques were addressed. I do think that the overall topic, like everyone has said before, is extremely broad. So I think you would really benefit from maybe breaking this down into some smaller topics and kind of revisiting mental health in the fashion industry, addressing the toxicity of the industry and and how that is affecting mental health. I think that would be really great follow-up to that. Also, just kind of maybe further understanding and defining mental health, because it seems like what we're doing is we're kind of lumping mental health with neurodivergency, right? And we're kind of lumping all of these things together, which they're not quite all the same. And maybe that's just me nitpicking, because like I said, my daughter is on the spectrum, so that means something to me. But I think that overall, I would say that you guys, the conversation started to go in a more, what I would feel, a healthier direction. So thank you.
Thank you, Adnesha. And us as instructors, we definitely try to infuse our classes and share the perspective that could help future fashion professionals to navigate the industry successfully from all standpoints, including mental wellness. I know Diana speak for you and Alexey, Josh Walker, who is in the audience as well, and the Academy resources. So although we do not have any particular ongoing class or group that would be focusing on mental health, and I believe we maybe should, but it's definitely a topic that we try to cover in the classes as often as we can, because again, it's part of your professional preparedness, and we, more than anything, we want you to succeed. And this is part of the knowledge that we think is important for you to have leaving the school.
I would just like to say that the Academy, in my personal experience, has been so supportive of me. From the accessibility office to, instructors like Elena, Flora, Bonnie Reynolds, Nick Gutierrez, any professor that I've had, very understanding and realizing that even, through accessibility, I think it's like for excused absences, I think it's like you get 3 excused or you get 3 extensions on late work. But even when I've voiced to like Elena, a depressed episode lasting like a month, I like can't get back on my feet, or I need that extra support. And I felt like I've always just been responded to with such support. So
oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear that feedback, Kailyn. We'll be wrapping up. Diane, I know you're bursting with positivity at all times. If you'd like to share your final thoughts, and then we'll be finishing the workshop.
So what I'd like to acknowledge Kailyn, and she was my wonderful student and hardworking. You spoke of your mother, your single mother. She sounds like the most wonderful person, I must say, with your family, and how she took care of you throughout this. And I and other instructors were more than happy to give you whatever you needed, whatever support you needed, time you needed, because it was very apparent that you were dealing with serious issues, but also it was very apparent that you had talent that we wanted to encourage and ideas that we wanted to encourage. And now I see you generously sharing your life and your experiences with other students. And I applaud you, and do stay in touch. I hope that I encounter you again. Yes. And Alexey, I want to really acknowledge you. I read your piece in August 2 years ago. And it was the first time I'd seen a very bold and brave acknowledgement of your situation that you'd been through. And it was a rare opportunity and a very rare moment where a person suffering was eloquent and positive and candid and very transparent about the situation. And your words went viral. The honesty of your words and the bravery were very apparent. And I'm sure they've now been read by millions of people and have assisted and inspired and helped many people. So thank you for that. And thank you for using your talent as a writer to shine a light into a situation of depression and mental problems and instability at that time that can inspire other people. Also, Uduak, I'd like to acknowledge you as well for the wonderful way you gave a balance to individuals and to the business side as well, and that were later expressed by others. But your wisdom from your legal point of view was tremendously helpful, and I think a very good balance to this issue as well. And I think all of us are trying to find a way to discuss with people that we know. I have friends who have mental illnesses. I have a friend who has, if you looked at on the scale of, do you have any of these problems, to indicate that several of my friends have problems. One of them pretty much, I could tick off 20 of them. Mm-hmm. And so with great sympathy, I'm helping her and in a very delicate situation and other people. But I think that that we all want to learn the language of talking to others. We want to learn the language of how do you bring up something to another person. And I think there's such respect for talent, like Lee McQueen, for example. It's not easy for anyone, whether it's a fellow worker, whether it's his boss, whether it's the owner of the company, whoever it might be. And you would be aware of this also, Alexey, that very, very difficult to know the language to approach that person, and not wanting to embarrass them, not wanting to insult them, not wanting to possibly throw them away. I have a friend who has a long time problem and chronic problem, and several friends have tried to broach the topic with her, and she cut them off entirely. So I realized that I don't want to do that. I want to maintain a relationship with her. But I wish my sympathy to everyone and goodwill to everyone who's dealing with all of these issues today. We're shining lights and to all these corners. And now recently I love the idea that gender neutrality fashion is coming to the fore and is going to help a lot of people deal with identity issues and gender issues and not suffer as people have in the past. I also want to acknowledge, I'm happy to see my friend Nia, my student Nia, who brings his point of view about mental health issues in the native, our original population and wonderful Native American people, the words that we use correctly now. And thanks to Nia for your insight into problems among people that you know as well and what they're dealing with. So there's so many aspects to this issue. And Elena, thank you so much for your fantastic, solid program. And it was the start of a conversation.
It did. And I also believe we didn't have time to go over more in details about the language and the writing. So that conversation should be continued. And we won't wait until next May to do it, but definitely we'll run it in one of the next workshops, because the language, writing, wording, how things are named, the resources that you use in writing when you're interviewing a creative, being open about a mental health condition, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of language you use, when you write about it is extremely important, because at the end of the day, this is what gives a certain perspective and nuances to this complex topic. So again, to be continued, the conversation is not over. I wanted also to invite everyone to explore a new platform that's amazing particularly for these topics, called Clubhouse. This is where Florian and I, Diane and Alexey, often interact. We have a weekly meetup every Thursday morning at 11 o'clock, where journalism and social media instructors, current students, alums are gathering. It's an interesting new format that for all of us who are verbal in our art, like Kailyn and Uduak, Dileka, who's one of our MA journalism graduates as well. So because we work with words and with language, so all new verbal formats of interaction close to us and we feel comfortable with. So again, if you are feeling the same, so please join the ongoing talks. We don't have an agenda, to be honest. The conversations are spontaneous, but on Clubhouse you can find ongoing established groups that are making it their focus to shed light and help creatives, and not only creatives, to find helpful resources in mental health situations and conditions. So I invite everyone to explore those resources. So again, we will be finishing now. I will share with everyone the recording of the workshop. We'll also post it on social media at Academy U Fashion Media, the resource for fashion journalism program. And the recording will be also posted at the YouTube channel of Academy of Art University video resources. And again, the conversation will be continued. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Elena.
Tuning.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Alexey. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Elena.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Take care.